Hey y'all, and welcome to PolitiBrawl. My name is Brian, and Charlie Kirk just wrecks this know-nothing college student and kind of proves once and for all that our education system needs deep reform. Let's dive in.
Oh, all right. So I have a question about the name of the tour. Could you tell me what you mean by brainwashing?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally on college campuses, you are being brainwashed, and by brainwashing, you don't allow dissident ideas, different perspectives or worldviews, and typically on campuses, you'll learn some of the worst, most parasitic ideas imaginable. So,
Well, even so, I would argue that brainwashing is a little bit of a harsh term. My parents lived in the Soviet Union. My grandparents lived in the Soviet Union. My great-grandparents narrowly avoided.
Campuses are very similar to what's happened in the Soviet Union.
They are not.
Well, so let me ask you a question. On most campuses, is this kind of discourse invited and allowed? In most of your campuses, would you say that if you are a conservative, do you get graded fairly?
Yeah.
Do you guys get graded fairly? Raise your... That's Soviet-style intimidation, right? Disagree, punishment.
That's not Soviet-style intimidation. You know what Soviet-style intimidation is?
Well, the next step would be like, I don't know, calling the whole country garbage. Half the country garbage.
That's not what the Soviets did. Are conservatives getting sent to gulags?
Well, actually, Steve Bannon went to federal prison. Peter Navarro went to federal prison. Donald Trump faced 700 years in federal prison. There are 280 January 6th pretrial prisoners right now for nonviolent offenses right now. And by the way, those are like similar to gulags, awful conditions. So it's actually, this country is much more like the Soviet Union than you might actually lead to believe. Right?
No, I mean, okay, sure. You have a couple examples of some people who high-profile conservatives who were sent to federal prison.
I can keep on going. By the way, Douglas Mackey went to jail for making a meme. Do you know who Douglas Mackey is? You might not.
No, I don't.
Douglas Mackey went to federal prison. Is going to federal prison for making a meme in the 2016 election. We don't respect freedom of speech anymore. We don't respect dissident voices. And by the way, don't take my word for it. This is why Elon Musk and Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard have left the Democrat Party, and they say the Democrat Party is a party of Soviets and a party of totalitarians. So it's not just Charlie Kirk saying this; it's former Democrats. And yes, of course, the Soviet was a more extreme version of it, but that's where we are headed. We're a country where if you have certain politics, you have a higher likelihood of going to jail.
Well, let me ask you something. In order for, I would say that brainwashing, it can't happen overnight. It can't happen in 4 years. The fact that we have essentially alternating terms between the parties, there's no way to systematically establish something within 4 years.
You're right. It would take sending somebody to K through 12 education and then to college to get them brainwashed. We don't have anything like that in this country.
What happens in K through 12? What happens in
in most public schools in this state across the country? You're told to hate the country. You're told that America's systemically racist. You're not taught who Thomas Jefferson is, or James Madison, or John Jay, or the Federalist Papers.
Well, that's simply false. Name a school where they don't tell you who Thomas Jefferson is.
Do you think they teach Thomas Jefferson as a hero or a villain in most public schools across the South?
Who would you say Thomas Jefferson is?
Well, I mean, Thomas Jefferson was America's third president and the author of the Declaration of Independence, an American hero.
Is there a gray area? There must be a gray area. You can't say, oh, he's definitively a hero or he's definitively a villain.
I mean, hold on. Yes, of course he did things that were bad, but he helped found the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. That's pretty heroic.
So would you say that you have to, would you say that you...
But yes, of course you mentioned the things he did wrong, but in history, you must understand people in the context of the times of which they live. And the context of the time of which he lived was widespread. He actually released the slaves at the end of his life. And that's one example of many, by the way. But the point is this, is that the emphasis on trying to get a generation to hate the country has become largely brainwashed.
Back to Thomas Jefferson, you say that it's based on the norms of the time period. Were there norms in the late 1700s, early 1800s that would have allowed rape of a slave? Sally Hemings?
First of all, that's never been proven. I don't want to go too deep down the Thomas Jefferson hole, but let's just kind of go... what Thomas Jefferson did is he gave you a free society that your parents liked so much that they left the Soviet Union and came to. Thank you, Thomas Jefferson. That's probably worthy of hero status.
I'm not saying that he's entirely a villain either. I'm saying that there's a gray area, and you say, oh, well, do they teach him as a hero or a villain? It doesn't matter.
But everyone... No, hold on. First of all, they don't. Just so we're clear, they are removing any reference to Thomas Jefferson in curriculum as if he's anything good at all. They say that he shouldn't even be considered as someone worthy. Monticello is now littered with slave references, saying that Thomas Jefferson was this awful person.
Well, of course it's littered with slave references. Of course Monticello, you can't just erase the part of history
We're
that you
not
don't
talking
like.
No, erase or emphasize. You see, when we emphasize over people's heroic accomplishments, what you're doing is you're diluting the triumph of their contribution to the society, right? And so, okay, yeah, happy to mention it. But can you also mention that a lot of people in history owned slaves, and very few of them started the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world? And by the way, every society has owned slaves up into America, but America started the end of slavery, thanks to people like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, John Jay, etc. So what is brainwashing? Brainwashing is not letting the other side of the story be told. And I have a serious question. Do you think most college kids, maybe at this campus, yes, could even tell me the preamble of the Declaration of Independence?
No.
Okay. Do you think that they can name, how many articles of the Constitution are there?
5.
7. No, it's not Trivial Pursuit, right? But I mean, the point is that most people don't know anything about their country. They know nothing about their country. Okay? Yet they know a lot about how America is systemically racist, and they know a lot about how like trans people are like being marginalized.
Charlie Kirk picked the right name for the tour because this kid, he's kind of brainwashed. And I feel sorry for him to some degree, but then you remember that he's wearing a Kyiv shirt, okay? He is, I think his family is from Ukraine in the former Soviet Union. I think that his family would know the trends. They would know the signs. And if you've watched the Chernobyl series, you'd know that everyone knew something was wrong. Everyone knew that the government knew something was wrong. The government knew that the people knew. And the government never did anything about it. At least until it was almost too late. This is a Soviet-style society right now that we are continually pushing here in America, here in the West. And I have this working thesis that in order to win World War II, the nations that end up winning had to adopt some more authoritarian-style policies in order for their nation to survive. And that is now metastasized so much that we're now looking at Europe being absolutely crazy. And we're watching our education system, after decades, start churning out students like this. And this isn't anything new. And as a matter of fact, I love using this story as an example. In the 3rd grade, I was in public school from kindergarten to 5th grade. And I enjoyed it for the most part. I got a better education where I went afterwards. As a matter of fact, the private school I went to for high school was better than my college level of education, which is very telling. But I remember the 3rd grade, every kid got a whole Time magazine for kids. But I started noticing a trend. Whenever we would get it, it would basically be a retelling of the same 3 stories. The crisis in Darfur, in Sudan. Then there was how we keep losing the rainforest, and how to make more green energy. How to make your area more green. And I guess even as a kid, I noticed these patterns. And as an adult, I now realize, oh, I was being manipulated as a child and someone who had trusted the education system. And so, yeah, the K-12 system is quite literally designed to destroy and then rework the minds of average and more often not inquisitive people, and in order to just slowly erode the things that make this country great. And this is another layer that we've got to peel back, because this kid constantly falls back on Thomas Jefferson. Why? Why do you care so much about his indiscretions and not care about his accomplishments? What is the point of tearing down someone who helped build the greatest nation on earth? Now, all of a sudden, the answer, it lies in the question. That is the point. To demoralize people who have patriotic tendencies. To remind kids, hey, your patriotism is a bad thing. You need to be more docile. You need to be more submissive. You need to hate your history and love what we're teaching you. That, to me, sounds like Soviet-style propaganda. And you'd think that a kid whose family members had fled that system would know that. As a matter of fact, while we're on the topic of propaganda and education, here's something interesting from the Brookings Institute, no less. More than 2/3 of Republicans believe that public schools promote liberal viewpoints, while Democrats and independents see a more neutral or balanced approach. Only about 17% of Democrats believe that public schools promote conservative viewpoints. Those are some interesting numbers. So 2/3 of Republicans are saying schools are too liberal. And then the Democrats and the independents are saying, nope, everything's fine. That tells me that the people who think everything's fine know that this stuff, that their education is being catered directly for them and at the expense of conservatives. Because if everything's fine and one person is complaining about something, there's something wrong going on. The conservatives are right to complain about the public education system. All right, and even in red states, we've got areas in rural Georgia, rural Alabama. You'll find stories all the time of people with these very, very odd teachers with pride flags and then no American flag to say the Pledge of Allegiance to. Although, side note, saying the Pledge of Allegiance over and over and over every morning. I'm sorry, I haven't broken my oath since the last time I said it. Why do I need to say it again? Never liked that as a kid. The again, that's a pattern recognition sort of thing. But the reality is, if conservatives are saying, hey, this area is too liberal, and the liberals saying, no, it's just right, that means there's something wrong with Goldilocks' porridge. In other words, we're noticing a trend. And this trend has been getting worse. I think it started getting bad in the 90s. They realized they could get, Democrats and people in education realized they can get away with it. And what is more communistic than trying to completely warp the minds of younger generations? That's the very core teaching of Maoism. Get the kids while they're young. This is why so many conservatives have been trying to make their alternative schools. But when I say, no, I think there's a better solution, we can change it from the top down. The way our curriculums work, I think, are fundamentally flawed. Our class systems are wrong. We're based on an old Prussian model that's pretty much only good if you're in military school. Well, guess what? Not everyone's built for the military. I think we need other forms of education. We need more classical. We need more Montessori, for that matter. We need to open up the ability to have more homeschooling. The way we learn is not through constant lectures in class. But the way we get our indoctrination starts not in the colleges. That's where the things have been incubated and the egg hatches. No, but there is something wrong with the incubation process. It's going on as deep as our earliest educational systems. It's going as early as preschool in some cases. The reality is education has been, for the most part, captured. And that's a very Soviet thing to do. That's a very communistic thing to do. And so, yeah, for Charlie Kirk to be out here on this "you have been brainwashed" tour, it's going to resonate with a few people, but that's sort of the truth. And you could even hear it from the crowd that conservative students know it's harder for them to get good grades because the more liberal professors want certain answers from them. Now, I have no anecdotal evidence for this because I again, went to a private college. But even then, I could tell that the kids that were there, half of them are crazy liberals. People that I've had to block out of my personal life because there's nothing but these negative, whiny, complainy people. Millennials, this describes about half of us. And I'm trying to tell the older generations to help stop this problem before it gets worse. Gen Z is more based than my fellow millennials. That's great. But we have got to reform our education system at its fundamental core. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. My name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on PolitiBrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good one.